Female Fluence. We are a place of women empowering women. This is a safe environment where females are not judged nor afraid to flourish. My goal is to help you live an energized life of balance, whether as a mom, a wife, or in your profession. It is time to have self-worth and self-compassion. Live in the present moment and surround yourself with only healthy connections. So join me, Mashour, a woman empowerment life coach, an educator, and a mother of three, to help take you on a journey of true identity and inspiration. The importance of mood and mental health in a woman's lives cannot be understated. These aspects significantly impact relationships, self-esteem, work performance, and physical well-being. Research has identified potential links between mental health conditions and physical ailments like heart disease. As Michelle Obama wisely said, communities, countries, and ultimately the world are only as strong as their women's health. We need to take care of ourselves. To achieve true well-being, it's essential to address and process past traumas. Our bodies retain the effects of trauma as explored in the great book, The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Overcoming trauma can be a lifelong journey, but healing is possible. Joining us today is Demarra West, a licensed therapist since 2010. She has experienced 8 out of 10 trauma incidents measured by the Adverse Childhood Experiences Scale. This realization led her to explore various wellness modalities that have facilitated her in healing and created more peace, joy, and abundance in every area of her life. Not only is she a registered yoga teacher, but she's also certified in yoga as a peace practice and trauma sensitive. She's also a Reiki master trained in EFT therapy and the founder of Be Well Beautiful Woman, which provides accessible wellness and business support for female leaders and entrepreneurs. Welcome. I'm thrilled to have you on my show today. Welcome to Female Fluence.
Yes, Pearl, I am delighted to be here. Thanks for having me on. Excited about this conversation. I know we're talking trauma, right? But just excited to bring the message, right?
Of course.
Healing from trauma to your audience.
Of course, of course. If we can start off to get to know you better, if you can tell us a little bit about your journey. As I said in your introduction, your journey has not been an easy one, and you've had many challenges to overcome. So if you can tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just finished my first book called Me Too, A Therapist's Journey to Heal, Find Liberation and Joy. It touches on those 8 ACEs that you talked about. It looks at trauma across 10 factors, including things like divorce and witnessing domestic violence and sexual trauma, the whole gamut when we think about trauma. And as you said, I experienced 8 of those. And so, the inspiration behind the book was really to help people to understand trauma, more specifically complex trauma, more specifically how it affects children. And then the modalities, I should say, or the framework, I should say, that led me, to healing myself. And, it's funny that even though I became a therapist many years ago, long before I immersed myself into holistic healing modalities, and I see therapy as certainly a part of a mechanism to heal, when we're talking about indigenous healing practices like breath work and like yoga and things of that nature, we're talking about amplifying the body's ability to heal itself, right? So it's really co-creating the body's ability to heal by moving energy through. And so, from the time that I was about the age of 6, and even before that, with some of the things that were happening, but not necessarily memories of them, that's when trauma happened. And so that's where the book begins at the age of 6, and this traumatic incident that occurred. And then there was a series of things that happened post that up until the time that I was about 14, which, nearly obliterated me, quite honestly. And I was a walking zombie for many years that followed that. And so about the age of 18, things started to shift for me, but really more external than anything, right? So on the surface, everything looked great. I knew that becoming a therapist was being driven by the trauma that I experienced. But even as a therapist in training, we're not doing a deep analysis of trauma, right? You're really learning from more of a general standpoint about how to diagnose individuals, how to properly treat them, and not saying that you're not adequately prepared to work in the field. But it wasn't actually until years later and doing a deep analysis through the Trauma Center for Embodiment that and reading books like Vander Kolk's book on trauma and things like trauma stewardship that I realized me too. And that's why the title is what it is, because people have a lot of assumptions about therapists and our like rival, and they put us on this pedestal. But the reality is that we're humans too. And a lot of times are the very things that have driven us to become therapists, we have some healing to do within ourselves. And so, when I became a therapist, I didn't realize, I just thought, oh, that was the past. I was a kid then. I'm Demarra the entrepreneur. I'm a wife. I'm a mother. I'm, in graduate school. I've launched a successful business. So all of these things that certainly felt good to materialize in my life, but those externalizing healing and joy and peace is not a sustainable practice, right? It's the equivalent of getting on a roller coaster and you have the thrill of the roller coaster and, you get off the roller coaster and it lingers some, but eventually you forget about the fact that you were just on that roller coaster, right?
Right.
And so it wasn't actually until I started to immerse myself in holistic practices, indigenous practices like breath work and forest bathing and Reiki and yoga, that I was really able to tap into something deep within myself and to ignite a very deep healing and to access abundance in every single way possible, right? Because it's not just about monetary wealth, which I had experienced a great deal of over the course of, being an entrepreneur for 15 years. But, what the data shows is that the happiness quotient associated with income, it plateaus at a certain point.
Yes.
Right? So I don't know what the numbers are now, but 10 years ago, we were for a single person, we were talking $80,000, $90,000 a year. Now, I'm not saying that that's not right. Like, and depending on where you live, so a place like Michigan, $90,000 for a single person, you live pretty comfortably, right? But the happiness associated with your quality of life is going to peak at that point, no matter how much you can afford, right? I'm not talking about the momentary bouts of happiness we have in
that satisfaction, that
exactly.
you have when you
I'm
purchase something
yes, the day-to-day vibration of joy and peace and co-creation and control over every thought, every emotion, every action in our lives that helps us to move towards a space of liberation and healing and joy or away from it.
The best kind of whatever, it can be a therapist or a teacher, or coach, doctor, the best type is the type who actually is able to, from the beginning, look within and kind of heal whatever they have within themselves, because that's going to make them even a better therapist, because you've done the healing work, what's happening, and you're not going to get triggered by something that your patient or client says, because you've done the healing work. So I think what you've done is really admirable, because that's what you have to do in order to heal yourself. Even for like us, for coaches, like they tell us, like we go through a program where we have to go through and heal everything that's within us so that we're able to talk and, help our clients. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah. And even though certainly that's part of our, the thought process, many of us don't, right? The reality is many of us don't, because there's a lot of assumptions that we make about what healing looks like. And the things that we haven't faced, we haven't actually healed from, right? Now, I'm not saying that we have to dwell on the past. That's the difference between therapy and coaching. And I'm a certified professional coach as well. And, coaches, we don't look at the past. We're not we're talking, let's curate a beautiful vision.
Exactly.
Let's move forward with your life. And that in itself can be enough. But sometimes there's still this nuance that's layered, that's never ending. And particularly depending on the depth of the wound, right? And so when we're talking about things like sexual trauma, When people say, oh, well, this happened 10 years ago, what's the big deal? Well, it is a big deal because that survivor has to live with that. There are remnants of that for the rest
Yes,
of their lives in some shape or form. No, it doesn't mean that you can't be well,
of
but it means
course.
that you have to continue to face it. You have to continue, just like grieving never
Exactly.
really ends,
Because it
right?
comes back to haunt you somewhere
Yeah,
along your life, it will come back. So once you heal
100%.
it, and I mean, with you, you're saying from 6 years old to, you said, was it 14 or 18? That's
Yeah,
a,
14.
and that's like a really tough age that, to go through so much, and, to have that, the childhood that you want to embrace and have memories of, and then to look back upon, so you have to heal those so that you can move on. What was the turning point? Like, the moment that you realize that you have one life and it's time to change things around. You can either choose to feel sorry for yourself and say, why me? And just go down the depression road or whatnot, or you can just say, no, this is who I am. I went through this. I have one life. I have to make things better for myself.
I would say it was, and this is in the book, like towards my 18th birthday, some things started to shift, and I had an incident that happened. And I was already starting to think about doing some things differently. I was already in community college. I had graduated because, in part of some of the challenges that I endured as an adolescent, I graduated from high school at 16. I did everything I could to be done with school. I got my mom to co-sign for a place for me. So I moved into my own apartment at the age of 16. I always worked. I started babysitting at 10. I had my first real job at 14. And that never stopped. I always worked. And so things were very rough that summer after I graduated from high school. And by that next year, because of a series of circumstances, and particularly this one incident that was kind of a culmination for me, I just realized I just didn't want to live that way anymore. And like from that point, things didn't like 100% shift, but things started to
The
gradually.
beginning.
As I started to ponder a different life for myself, and not even necessarily spending a whole lot of time pondering this, but
Mhm.
more so just a sense that I wanted better for my life. And I think even just the fact that I was in community college spoke to that. I mean, the fact that I always maintained a job, it spoke to that I was always anchored in making things happen for my life. Now, what I have since come to realize is that because people are number one pathway to prosperity, through people, life actually flows better. It's much easier. So I knew hard work and I could grind, and I still can, like nobody's business. I can play hard and work hard and all the things hard. And what abundance has taught me in the process of co-creation is that I don't actually have to work. Like there are times, and yes, we have to harvest. And then there's times we get to sit back and we get to enjoy the harvest,
Right.
right? Or there are times when, I mean, even just being in this constant state of doing internal work on self and that internal knowing and that raised consciousness, and what that raised consciousness can do in terms of knowing when support is available to us, knowing when we should ask for help, knowing when help is actually on the horizon for us,
Mhm.
having the courage to actually walk through the door. These are all things because life is meant to be lived with ease. Abundance is our birthright. Trauma distorts our viewpoint of that, and any form of scarcity, whether we're talking about trauma or poverty, which, one could argue that poverty is certainly a trauma factor as well. And I grew up in poverty on top of the 8 trauma factors, but any form of lack creates scarcity, right?
Right, right.
So when you are operating from a space of scarcity and you don't know anything other than that, then you're going to move from a place of desperation. You're going to move from a place of rigor. You're going to move from a place of victimization. But I had the work that I have done, and I can relate to that, right? I have, me too, victimhood and some things that, but I didn't know. And if you would have asked me that years ago, I would have never seen myself as a victim by any means. It's like, how could I be that when I'm working so diligently to have a better life for myself? But how I saw the world and how hard I worked and my inability to ask for help, just all the ways that I was harming myself in the process and thinking that's just the way that life is. You grind and you get to, reap the fruits of grinding. And I think that grind culture can be quite problematic if all we're talking about is grinding, grinding, grinding. And without this sense that like rest is really important.
Take
Like
a breath. Right.
like rest is important, right?
Right.
Rest are, that's a part of flow state and E state, because in a state of rest, that's where, creativity can kick in.
Of
That's
course.
where like all of these things that defy like left brain thinking, like, and so this is why that balance between left brain, right brain, masculine, feminine is so critically important, because we do need to operate in the masculine at times, and we do need to operate more in the feminine. We've been socialized much more towards the masculine energies, though, right? Of producing and having our worthiness be connected with the production process versus all of the things related to connection. Somebody was just saying this. I'll finish with this. They say, oh, communication is a soft skill. Whoever said a hard conversation, a difficult conversation was a soft skill? And it's like, you're right. Of course, this isn't really a soft skill. It takes great skill to be an effective communicator, right? So I think even how we brand, how things have been branded, the meaning derived from certain things that and meaning is really in relationship to what's meaningful for us anyway, right? This is why creating visions for our own lives is so critical, because we get to define for ourselves what does it mean to be and who do we want to be, essentially.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. Well, what tips do you have for our listeners today who have experienced some sort of a trauma like you have experienced? What advice do you have for them?
I don't see a lot of clinical clients these days. My licensure, I keep it current, and I've got one clinical client that I work with, and we started working together right before the pandemic. And when they brought up the fact that they wanted to really address their trauma, what I said to them was, just make sure that you're ready, because once we open this up, right? Once we open it up, it's going to hurt until it feels better. It's important for us to certainly face things, but to understand when we're ready. And it's reminiscent of like yoga. When I'm teaching a yoga class, I'll say, honor your body. And I say that often, right? And really pay attention to what's showing up in your body and really focus on your own movement, right? And your own breath. You don't have to focus on anyone else. And the reason why is because the body has wisdom, right? The body knows. So there's a difference between having pain, real pain that's caused as a result of a form because we haven't moved that way, right? Versus the kind of pain that's actually on the verge of hurting us.
Right.
So we have to be able to know when we're ready, because once we open up that door, it's the same thing that happens for people. People will often say, gosh, I'm afraid to cry, because if I cry, like, I don't know when it's going to stop. It's like that. And so, of course, crying eventually stops. Her pain eventually stops as long as we stay in long enough. And so the other thing that I would say is that once we open that door, we've got to be willing to stay in it long enough to do the work. And because it hurts before it feels better,
Right.
many of us will want to opt out.
Yeah. Just close the door back again.
Close
it, shut it again. Yeah.
And there's no judgment. Let me be really clear. There's no judgment about that. If people are listening and they've done that before, like, it doesn't matter what's happened in the past, and it doesn't even quite matter what happens in the future. But what does matter is what we decide right now in the moment, what we want to do, right? And I would say, find someone who is trauma informed. So if you're going to work with a therapist, make sure that they have a deep analysis of trauma, because just because you're a therapist doesn't mean that you have a deep analysis of trauma. Therapists are rigorously trained. I mean, many graduate programs are only 30 credit hour programs. To become a therapist, whether it's a social worker or a licensed professional counselor, which gives you that terminal degree at the master's level, it's a 60 credit hour program, not to mention 3,000 hours that you work in the field before you even can take the exam to be fully licensed, right? But even with all that preparedness, Pearl, like, unless you've done a deep analysis of trauma and your training specifically has focused on trauma,
Right.
you're not going to have the acumen necessary to be able to fully support someone who has matriculated through trauma, right?
Right.
So if you are a listener and you're wanting to work with a therapist, and even coach can be trauma informed, can be trauma trained. I've gone through coaching training that was trauma focused, but I've also done very deep analysis of trauma in general, not to mention the books. But I'm talking, a 300-hour I think it's a 300-hour program through the Trauma for Center and Embodiment based in Boston, using books like Vander Kolk's and Trauma Stewardship and a lot of research and things of that nature. So those are the three things that I would say, right? Like make sure that you're ready and know. And the fourth thing that I'll say, Pearl, is that I'm not, because I'm trained in a lot of different things. Oftentimes the school of thought is that, if you don't practice yoga every single day, you're not a yogi. I don't believe that. If you don't do that, what I believe is that it's important to create space in general, right? It's important for us to be committed to our craft in general. But the craft can be generalized in terms of the craft of healing, which is comprised of breath work and force bathing and yoga and Reiki and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because you said it earlier about the importance of making sure that the person that you work with is also doing their own work.
Right.
And knowing that there are lots of modalities, lots of pathways by which you can get to a place of healing, right? This is why we have tons of tools that we can put in our toolbox that helps us in our healing journey, right? This is why we have journaling, and we have art therapy, and we have talk therapy, and you have somatic healing, and you have nature-based things and forest bathing. We have tons of things. And all of these things, what amazes me is that they have similar effects on the body and the mind and the spirit. Different practice, but has the same kind of effects, right? What that tells me is that there is not one pathway by which we can become healed. So even if we're not ready to work with a therapist, like just being out in nature helps the body to heal. It helps the body to center. It helps the body to get back into a homeostasis point, right? Going outside barefoot and grounding for a couple minutes, laying down in the grass, that helps the body to just connect with the earth, right? There's all these things energetically that we can do, mindset work and and movement that help dance, right? Dance is a ritual experience. It's a healing experience for people. This is why it's been a part of indigenous cultures for eons, right?
Yes.
So I think it's just important for us to acknowledge that when we're ready to heal, we will be presented with tons of options, right? And I think that's the indication. When we're really ready, all kinds of things will start to show up in our pathway to support us in guiding towards that. And all we have to do is say yes, right? Have the courage. Because as I said before, once we open it up, it's not easy. And I don't want to pretend that healing work is easy, Pearl. It's not easy. It is the most challenging work we will ever do, but it's the most worthwhile work we will ever do, because liberation, choosing for ourselves who we are, having the courage to live fully into that. How you can't put a price tag on that. You can't put a price.
Never, of course.
You can't put a price tag on peace. You can't put a price tag on these things, right? Yeah, those are the things that I want to impart to your audience.
Thank you. I think that was very, very helpful. Now, do you believe that our past experiences can fuel personal growth? If it's anger from your past or whatnot, and if you can kind of do that, like you said, the healing process, but then use that anger kind of to push yourself to succeed or give yourself that personal growth it's like that, kick in that you need. Do you think that is true? Is that something that helps us?
I think that anger can certainly fuel us, because in a state of anger, we're still in a state of action, right? And if we're looking at emotions across the emotional guidance scale, Anger is a very low vibrational emotion. And what this means is that our ability to attract what we want at a more rapid rate is congruent based on how we feel much of the time, right? So at the top of the scale are things, and not if, at the top of the scale, we're talking about emotions like optimism and freedom and gratitude and love and passion, right? Those are at the top of the scale. So if we're feeling that much of the time in life, then life is going to be much better from that place. It's going to be sweeter from that place. We're going to feel better. We're going to be attracting more with ease from that place. Life is going to just be better. On the flip side, if our emotions, the majority of this time, are on the lower rate of the scale, anger being one of them, even though anger is a better emotion than, let's say, depression, right? Because depression, it cripples us. From this place of depression, we can't mobilize, right?
Right.
But if that is the constant state, right? And from anger to jealousy to fear to anxiety, those lower level emotions are going to block our flow state, block us energetically. And not only when we have anxiety, what does that feel like? When we're afraid, what does that feel like? So I am not minimizing our emotions. I want to be really clear about this.
Right.
Our emotions are there as a teacher for us, always. Our emotions are always teaching us something. But if we only just have an emotion and we let it just be the puppet master in our lives, and which is the fuel, then sure, certain things can happen from that place. But like, what is it going to take for you to get there?
Yeah.
How is it going to feel for you to get there? So what I would actually recommend is that anger become alchemized into a very higher level emotion. We release it.
So you move up to the emotional scale, right?
Because this is the thing, and I've been there, done that, right? There were many people who wrote me off, many people who thought I was not going to amount to anything, overtly said that. Sometimes their actions represented it. They didn't come out and say it. Sometimes it showed up in the way that they treated me, all of that. I could choose. And there's been many times over the course of my life where, even to this day, where people don't like me, right? And it's like, well, I didn't do anything overtly to deserve this. I can choose, but this is not about me. It's not personal. And even when people harm us, it's not personal. It's not personal. This is why healing is so important, because when we don't heal, we harm. When we don't heal, we are going to harm other people, right? So at a minimum, we do it so we don't create harm. At a maximum, we heal so that we can have joy day in and day out. That is accessed from here, right? Now, I'm doing the prosperity plan right now for the fourth time, probably, out of the abundance book. And the affirmation today is something along the lines of focus on your inner world. Don't consume yourself with the outer world. What you can't do anything about this outer world, but you can do something always, every moment of the day, every thought. And we have more than 60,000 decisions alone that we make in a day, right? We have countless opportunities to be in our inner world, to be good, no matter what happens, no matter who likes us, who doesn't, no matter, how life is unfolding, we can still find the gifts of life. So I would choose to work out of that anger. And this is why I have a chapter in the book on forgiveness, because if we want to live well, we can't harbor unforgiveness.
No. Gotta let it go.
Not only does it affect the body, right? The research shows, and everything that I talk about, I always pull research, right? Because anecdotes are important. Our stories are important, but the research says a lot about this, even though I believe what Albert Einstein said, that everything that we measure is not meaningful, and everything meaningful we can't measure necessarily, right? But for the sake of making meaning from data, there is data out there, tons of it, to support that unforgiveness alone wreaks havoc on the body. It wreaks havoc on the body.
It does. It really does. I mean, you just feel heavy, like it bothers you all the time within, even though you can pretend and say, no, I don't care. I really don't care. I'm over it. But if you haven't forgiven, you will carry that with you forever.
Yes. Well, and not to mention some of the physical ailments that can show
Yes,
up
yes.
and manifest as a result of this is why those lower
Health
vibrational
problems,
emotions
right?
are
Yeah.
are so important to manage as well, because the more anxious we are, the more illness we're going to have.
Yes.
It's just there is a correlation between the mind and how the body is connected to the mind, right? This even, if someone is in a healing process, the people who heal more expeditiously are those that have a positive outlook on healing,
Yeah.
on life, right? So everything we think, it produces a vibration, every thought, every thought. So what I would say is that for individuals who are harboring anger, unforgiveness of any kind, these low level emotions, anxiety, etc., that's the work, right? Because if we can alchemize through healing, those can be alchemized so that we can be in that state of higher vibrational emotions, which is going to drastically change our lives. And our lives they're just better. They're just better when we're in that state. They're just better. We don't have to work as hard. And I don't know about you, Pearl, but I like a life of ease.
Yes, I do too. Don't we all? I mean, I can't agree with you more. I mean, we just like you said, we work hard, but we want to enjoy life and play hard as well. So that's what it's all about. It's like that peace of mind and just taking it all in and enjoying it, which actually raises another question. How can we work on fostering more self-love for ourselves?
Yeah. So I love this question. And, because of course, trauma is one of the things that robs us from that, right?
Yes.
We blame ourselves often for the trauma. Particularly if our body failed us, right? If our body's responding, this is why knowing the difference between the physiological effects that can happen because of sex, right? Versus your mind can know it's not right, but your body can respond, and you can have shame about this, right? Even though that's your body's natural design to respond in this way, even though mentally you're being harmed, right?
Right.
So I think that one of the ways that we reclaim our power, which in part is reclaiming self-love, is by using affirmations, right? And oftentimes really, acknowledging the parts of our bodies that are really easy for us to love, the parts that we love, and the parts that are not so easy, right? And using our hands, our hands have real healing power. Reiki, involve the light touch over your major organ centers or your chi or your chakra centers from here to here over your heart. In your lung area, your sacral, your root, which is your pelvic area.
So how does that, I mean, I know you're a Reiki master. Can you actually offer an explanation of how, I mean, I've heard of it before, but what is that exactly? How do you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what I'll say about Reiki, and then I'll come back to the self-love question, is that Reiki is an energy form of healing. And it started in Japan. And what it involves is a light touch using your hands. And you can be trained in first and second degree Reiki, or you can become a Reiki master and teacher. So I train people in first. I can train people in all levels. But right now I do a level 1 and level 2. To help people to channel their energy through their hands and to learn how to self-practice, and to do it in a virtual environment. Because, energy has it's not time bound, right? It's not, we can practice at any time, anywhere. I don't have to even physically see. I can picture you in my mind. I can channel energy to you that way. And because even if I was with you, it would just involve me putting my hands over. So I'm not actually touching you, essentially. So it starts here at your crown.
Okay.
They're associated with each, right? So this is purple at your
So,
crown.
so we're going with, is it based on the chakra? Is that how it works? Okay.
So I use these terms interchangeably. In the Western world, we're talking about your major organ centers.
Okay.
If we're talking about Chinese medicine, we're talking about chi centers. And if we're talking about Ayurvedic, which is, Indian-based medicine, we're talking about your chakra centers,
Okay.
right? This is going to be your crown. This is going to be your, oh my gosh, your crown, your third eye, right? So your crown is
Yes.
purple.
Yeah.
Your third eye is like
Right
like
in the center, right?
like a lapis
Yeah.
color.
Yeah.
And then you got your throat. Your throat's going to be like, so this is turquoise. I'm sorry. This is more of a lapis color here, your throat chakra. Here's your heart. This is going to be like a lime green color. And then right underneath your ribs, not quite your belly button, but right underneath your ribs. So like this part of your hand would touch the ribs if you were just letting your hands hang there. So that's going to be your solar plexus. That's going to be a yellow. So of course, heart is ability to give and receive love. Throat is ability to communicate your needs and your desires. Third eye is connected to your intuition. Your crown is really connected to like spirit, like outside of self. Third eye is too, but this is at a much deeper level. And then your throat is the connector between the two worlds, right? But everything else is the inner world. And then solar plexus is yellow. That's again that area where your lungs are, and right underneath your lungs. So that's going to be like knowledge of self, like who you are, your true essence. And then your belly button area is called your sacral. That's orange. So that's like creation, sensuality, things of that nature. And then your root is your pelvic. So it would be like this. And that's going to be connected to like, that's red. And that's going to be connected to like security, your relationship with money, your ability to trust yourself, to take care of yourself. Those kinds of things are connected. So each one has a different part that it plays. And the body is trying to get into a state of homeostasis always. And so energy work can help you to clear blocked energy. One of the things that happens with trauma is that if we don't heal from the things that have harmed us, trauma literally gets stored in the body, like at a cellular level. This is why somatic practices are so powerful. Like I'm sure that people, I've had experiences, I'll say, I'm sure other people have had as well, where I've seen my massage therapist and, she touches a certain part and like it releases something emotional. That's blocked energy.
Right.
That's trauma. That's something that is being stored. And who I don't know how long.
And what
right?
about like acupuncture? I know that's a huge one too.
Yeah. So
They can figure out
acupuncture.
the points, of
Yeah. So
stress.
certainly, absolutely. That's so, Tai Chi is a form of energy work. Anytime you are manipulating energy within the body, through visualization or through, needles in with acupuncture, right?
Right.
So as you know, with Tai Chi, you're just moving energy, right? With Reiki, you're lightly touching over parts of the body and channeling energy to move through you. And so any form of energy work is going to help to support you in a number of ways. And there's a lot of health benefits that come along with energy work. So every morning I actually begin my day with Reiki. It's rare. So I normally do Reiki. Sometimes I do the Silva mind control method. But normally it's Reiki where I'll do a whole sequence on myself. And that's before I even get out of bed.
That's a great way to start the day. So it's like, and if you have any, I would think like any bad energy from the day before or everything, it's like you just start and you're moving it through out so you can restart the day and feel fresh. Or if you had a
Yeah.
bad dream or whatnot, whatever it's going on inside of
Yeah.
you.
Well, and even throughout the day, and I'll come back to your question about self-love, even throughout the day, there'll be moments when, I'll be confronted with something. I'll say, I'm not even going to give that any energy right now. And like, even just this motion of like, that's releasing it, right? That's not allowing it to begin to take root energetically, because I don't want to. So there's ways that we can reject energy from coming in. I was talking to someone earlier and I said, let's just end the conversation because I knew it wasn't going anywhere. And so we always have the ability. This is why knowing ourselves is so important. And, the process of healing and liberation helps us to really know ourselves and honor ourselves, even in spite of the ways that, people have a hard time with us honoring themselves,
Of course.
right?
Yes,
Because
yes.
they want it to be done a certain way, right?
Yes.
Our boundaries are rubbing up against their boundaries, but that's not our problem, right? I don't even mean it from um a self-focused standpoint, but somewhat, yes. Like it's figuring out what's good for me in this and what's good for the collective, what's good for me and what's good for the collective,
Right.
and then making a decision from that point, right?
I love
Um,
that. Like you're able to like, it's like I'm not to even stop it. It's one thing to process the bad energy, but to be able to kind of have your own shield because you have a boundary and you just say, okay, like I'm not even allowing this to enter me, like, my soul, body, energy right now. I think that's a great tool to have in your toolbox.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well said, Pearl. And so I would say, in terms of self-love, affirmations are certainly very powerful, right? To say the things out loud, I love myself, I trust myself, I'm worthy, I'm capable, I'm brilliant. But even saying those words can sometimes feel so far removed from what we actually feel about ourselves, right?
Right.
And so if we can't say those things outright, then say a lighter version of those, right? But something that is geared towards you really honoring yourself. I think that any time that we're spending time in practice alone, it helps us to anchor into self. And when we anchor into self, it helps to automatically promote our abilities to love ourselves more, right? I think that any form of comparison can be really problematic, right? From the times that we think that we're better, we're lower than somebody else. So if we find ourselves doing that, then I would, highly recommend you just start to pay attention to that and start to pay attention to the things that you say to yourself out loud and to yourself. It's amazing. As I've done this consciousness raising work and hearing, my friends say things like, oh, that was so stupid of me to do that. Or, how could I be so dumb? And it's like,
Right.
whoa,
We're the
whoa.
we're the worst. Like we critique ourselves so bad. We're so critical of ourselves.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And so even that, if we start to pay attention to the words that we're saying out loud and maybe even invite people into our lives to help to reflect back to us, because you want to make sure that you want you're ready for that kind of feedback, right? And I would say like body scans are really important, right? So, a lot of times I'll do, and I'm on a self-love journey. I'm still on that self-love journey. I don't know if I'll ever not be on that journey, Pearl, to be very, very honest. And the last thing I would say is that if there's certain things that, really thinking about your body as a vessel, and, if there are certain things that you want to change about yourself, um, I think just be really clear about your why, right? And so I think about plastic surgery, for example, and I'm not anti-plastic surgery. I want to be really clear. I've never had any, but I'm not anti to plastic
Right.
surgery. I think that you can go from wanting to alter something small about yourself to becoming addicted. And
Yes.
every little thing is now about you cutting and tucking and nipping, and it's never going to be enough. And so we have to really ask ourselves, like, if I were to do this, would it be enough? Right? If I were to do this, would it be enough? Because if it's not going to be enough, then that's not the thing that you should do for yourself. Right. So be really clear about what the alteration, because, makeup, fashion, all of these things have the ability to make us feel better about our bodies. And again, there's nothing wrong with what we do as long as those things don't define us.
Exactly.
As long as our worthiness isn't wrapped up in the labels, wrapped up in the nick and the tuck, or the nip and the tuck. As long as our identity is not wrapped up in searching to be externally appealing, thinking that that's going to equate to self-love, because it doesn't. And all that does is it creates a chase that we never, ever, ever stop running. It's like the marathon that never stops, right? And I know many people,
You
beautiful
get
people.
into a cycle and you just can't, and it's never enough.
Yep. I know of someone who is just every year, for years, And luckily they've had good doctors, because when you look at them, you wouldn't know that they've had surgery, like they've had very, very good doctors. But it just makes me think, like, I'm like, oh, you probably looked gorgeous even before this, even before the very first procedure, right? Even before the very first procedure. But it's the equivalent of telling someone that they're telling someone who's anorexic that they're thin, because every time they look in the mirror, that's not what they see.
They don't.
We have to be really clear about what is it that we're seeing and why is it that we're seeing that, right? Because a lot of times the projections of what we see, they're actually being played out in part because of lies that we've taken on from our socialization, messages that we receive from our own mothers or aunts, or from the media at large, or from, one of the ramifications of, having sexual trauma, either you want to hide your body or you
The
want to
opposite.
alter your
Want it, yeah.
like you have extremes, right? Trauma shows up oftentimes with extremes.
Right.
And so those are the things that I would say, like, and knowing, just normalizing that self-love it's a lifelong journey, and no amount of externalization is ever going to make us love ourselves. We've got to do the inner work and allow that to be the guide. And I wouldn't even do any kind of plastic surgery or anything like that until I did my inner work, to be very honest.
Exactly.
And then you want to go get that.
I actually think that should be like the application form. Like, first do the inner work, and then you realize, okay, what do I exactly want to do to help myself now with the outer work before you go on. I think that would be a great idea if you could do that.
Yeah. Well, and we know it's like too much of a moneymaker, right? They're never going to put these restrictions in place, right, for people, because it's never going to happen. But I love, but it's an invitation, right, to the listeners to really reflect on this, right? And that your why is so critical, right? And then once you do your inner work, if you want, those breasts to be bigger, if you want, your waist to be smaller, if you want, then do it, right? Then do
exactly. All the power to you. Exactly.
100%. 100%.
We're going to be talking more about wellness too, but what is wellness to you? And I know we all like to treat ourselves to the spa and have a great day. But a lot of times, I mean, I know for myself and my experience, it's like I will have a beautiful day at the spa. The moment I come back, it's like my mind goes exactly back. Okay, I have to make dinner. It's this time. I have to do this. Oh, there's so much I have to do. Or the next day, even with a vacation, you go on an amazing vacation, you come back and immediately the next day you have forgotten you were on vacation. You're back in that, crazy mood and stressed. But how can we come up with a plan where we have true wellness that we can, it's not huge like a spa or a vacation, but we can maintain it on a daily basis. It doesn't have to be so, such a huge gesture kind of.
Yeah. This is such an important question, because I believe that most women approach wellness this way, right? You go get your hair done, you go shopping,
yes.
You go on that grand vacation, you do your spa day, and it feels really good in the moment. And then you're back to life, right?
You're back to reality.
And then you're thinking, when do I have my next spa appointment? Right.
Exactly. Right.
What an alternative is to think about your wellness as something that you practice every day, right? Something, and it doesn't have to be anything grand, because I want to honor the fact that, many of us who are listening are working mothers, right? And in the midst of that, we have a lot of responsibilities, and we don't have all of this grand timeline, right? But yet all of us have 5 minutes, right? All of us have a minute before we get out of bed to say what we're grateful for. All of us have 5 minutes where we can get into our breath during the day, even a minute, right? Even 30 seconds to do 3 deep breaths, to center ourselves, to get back into a state of calm, right? So what I really invite people to do is to think about, what are those bite-sized practices that you would be willing to do, that you want to do, that you'd be willing to do, that you think are going to have benefits, right? And the beautiful thing is that we're talking about tried and true practices. Any thought leader that exists that has reached, notoriety, they talk about the role that gratitude has played in their life, right? They've talked about the role that visioning has played in their life. Long before they had financial wealth, writing themselves checks for $15 million, right? Not barely having enough money to pay their rent. It's these little things that we do daily that make a major difference. It's what I said earlier, Pearl, like not even allowing certain things to energetically get into our space because we only have so much energy every day.
Yes.
When it's gone, it is gone.
It's gone. You're depleted.
100%. And so if we want to preserve our energy, then we want to really think about how are we spending our time? And is there room? And when we really take inventory in our lives, where is there room for us to take back some of that energy? For us, and actually these wellness practices that I'm talking about, they give us more energy, right? They do the opposite. They're not, draining us. They're actually giving us life force energy, right? They're pouring back into us. So, so the first thing that I would do is to really assess, like, how are you spending your time? I use this example often. Like, I can stream TV series, movies, like marathons, like nobody's business. And that's fine, right? Like, there's no shame in that. I enjoy that. Then I have to say, God, if I'm going to spend 4 hours watching this, what am I giving up? What am I giving up? And if I have a lot of things that are really important to me and I say are important to me, maybe I don't spend 4 hours like binge watching TV. And maybe I'm only spending 2 hours. Maybe I'm only spending 1 hour. Maybe I don't do any today because actually I have some other things that are really pressing. And so, we have to really examine for ourselves, like what is it that we value? Because what we really value, that's where we're spending our time. Outside of the responsibilities that we have and or those times when we're giving our power away simply because we think we have to. Because oftentimes even that is something that we can debunk, right? A lot of things that we think we have to do. It's like, well, who said you had to do that? Who said you had to do it like in exactly that same way, right? Who said it had to be that way? And so when we think about the fact that all of us have been conditioned, all of us, from the moment that we came into the world, our conditioning started. And so, like, to sift through what our real thoughts are, right? What our opinions are, what's most important to us, who we are, what does it mean for us to live out this way, right? That also gives us more room for us to discover the energy suckers and the energy savers.
Yes.
Going to be life-changing for day-to-day peace and joy. Day to day. And not saying that every day is going to be that, every second of the day. Absolutely not. But most days through our practices, we should be able to feel grounded enough that we can access that joy quickly. We can reject things that aren't actually serving us. We can make alterations. So we want to always think about too, like, what is our power? What power do we have? Because we always have power, even in the moments when we believe that we don't. We always have power, some power, always.
That is great advice. I hope our listeners are following through with this because we do have the power to do what we need to do to create peace of mind for ourselves. So on another note, actually, can you tell us about emotional freedom technique, EFT? I haven't been trained in it, but I have done it by observing like a YouTube video. And I've noticed that when I do actually do it, it really does calm me down. And I was wondering if you can kind of just do a mini demonstration, because I know it's hard because it's more like for our listeners to do it. So so they can visualize what it means when we're doing tapping and what parts of our body we're tapping and what are we doing it for.
Absolutely. So EFT tapping is another form of energy work, and it involves tapping over many of the major energy centers. What we're going to call them energy centers for the sake of EFT. So if I was doing an EFT session with you, Pearl, we would begin with you telling me something that was really bothering you, something that you're struggling with, right? You would, so do you want to do that now? Give me a real scenario, something that you're struggling with.
Okay, sure. Let's see. Just, I think going to bed on time. Just trying to balance my day where I can actually, it's like every day, it's like I'm going to wake up really early and I want to do the miracle morning routine and then go to bed on time. And I just can't accomplish this because there's too much to do.
Yeah. So what then we would do is we would take that scenario and then you would break it down, right? So I would ask you to tell me about a scenario when you really wanted to go to bed early and what happened. And then we would number that, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, right? And normally this works well, particularly when you're talking about like a conflict that you had with someone,
Okay, I
right?
see. Okay.
But it doesn't have to be that. It can be anything. So again, if we were taking the sleep thing, what's getting in the way of you sleeping?
I would say family, just a regular nighttime routine because I want to, I guess, have some time for myself in the evening. So by the time I get everything situated, lunch made, dinner, cleaned up, and then maybe spend a little time with my husband, and it's like, okay, now I have some quiet time to maybe watch my own show, catch up on emails or something like that that I'm trying to like kind of force in there, even though it should really be my bedtime. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what ends up happening.
Okay.
And I like the quiet time because I don't get it often. So it's like, okay, 30 minutes, like the house is quiet. Everyone's like, nobody needs me anymore.
Yes, yes. Okay. And what was there, have you recently had a conflict like with your husband about wanting to go to bed early, not having quiet time? Have you had any conflict with him about that, if you don't mind me asking?
Actually, he tells me to go to bed. He gets mad at me for not going to bed because he's really good and I get jealous of him because when he's like, you need to do like 3 nights a week where you go to bed early and just recharge at least, it's okay.
Okay.
Because I see him, if he's tired or if he has a headache, he doesn't care about anything that needs to be done, or like with the
Yeah.
kids, he's like, I'm done. I'm crashing. He just goes to bed. There's
Yeah.
no, I mean, I guess this goes back again, maybe to the male or female, but there's that guilt. For me, I would be like, oh, I need to do this. I forgot to do this. And I would feel guilty. Like if I went to my room early and closed the door, I think my
Yeah.
family would think I'm sick or something. They would just go into panic.
Okay. So even though this is not something you've done, but it's something you really want to do,
Yes.
What, and it sounds like you're preventing yourself from doing it,
Yes.
right? Okay. And what story are you telling yourself about why you don't deserve this time?
It's always like, no, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. Now, today, has to get done. Or I have to check one more email. I have to send this. There's these things that are like supposedly not all of them are really important and they can wait until the next day. But I give, I guess, silly deadlines to them that are not really there to push myself, to say, okay, this is the reason. I'm, justifying the reasons for myself.
So why do you do that? So when you go in and you check your email, or you're doing this, it has to be done. You're doing, what do you feel in those moments?
Even though I'm exhausted, like in my head, I know like sleep would be so much better for me. I don't know. That's a battle.
Yeah, yeah. So what we would do with this
Okay.
is we would now rate it, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it for you to go to bed early?
And
Okay.
because
It's a
I
10.
know on those nights that I do sleep well and because on average right now, I would say 6 hours of sleep. And then it's like go, go, go. So if I get, and I don't need much, I know my body, if I get 7 hours or 8, I am perfect. Like I'm overloaded. My energy is great. I feel really good. So if I can just do that, like be in bed, 11 o'clock sharp,
Yeah,
it'd be
yeah.
really good for
And
me.
and it has to be sharp. It has to be 11 o'clock sharp.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm like, if I can get there where I can just read for 5 minutes and kind of gradually get into that sleep mode, I think it would just be really beneficial.
Okay. And so then I know that you said that this is a ton for you. And what we want to be, normally it would be, oh, this is, I'm at a 10 in terms of being upset with this person. And we want to get it back down to a 1, right? But what we're going to do differently here is that because how frequently do you do this? Go to bed early.
Maybe like twice a month.
Okay. So we would say that maybe a 2 would be generous, right? Or a 9 would be generous, right? You're at
Okay.
a 9 in terms of the activity because that, you're at a 9 because you don't actually go to bed early, right? And what we're trying to do is get it down to a 1. Now, normally we would not do EFT this way, right? But we're
I
going to
understand. It's like we're doing it reverse based on the
we
topic.
are. We are. So we're just going to do it. So then what we would do is I would start you at the top of your head, right? And we're going to do this together.
Okay.
You're going to tap here, you're going to tap here, you're going to tap here,
Okay.
here, 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 and then here. Okay. So we're going to do this together. So what we would do is we would start with the problem. So the problem is that Pearl, you would say this. The problem is that I'm not going to sleep early enough. I'm telling myself I'm going and I'm completing emails and I'm doing this and I'm telling myself this, but I love and completely accept myself, right? So you start here telling the story, move down here.
And then for our listeners, can you say at like which area as you're tapping?
Yeah. And I'm going to say this out loud, right? I just wanted to illustrate. So let's start here at the crown. And then we would start right over the eyebrows. Okay. And so the tapping is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then you move on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You move on. If we just for the sake of sequencing, right? It doesn't always work this way, but for the sake of sequencing. Then you're going to do the side of your eyes. Then you're going to do underneath your nose. Then you're going to do underneath your lip. Right where that line is, where the chin is. Then you're going to do right in the middle of your chest. So you've got 2 fingers together. You're doing it on both sides, like right above your breastbone. Then you're doing it right on the side. I would say about 2 inches down from your armpit. And you're just tapping just like that. And then you're going to tap on the side of your hands. Okay. So let me go through a sequence just so that you can see this. I'm going to act as if I'm you, Pearl. So, okay. So, I really want to go to bed early, but I find myself checking emails and I'm just not giving myself permission to just get in bed and read a book, but I'm working to love myself completely and accept myself. Okay. Something along those lines. Right. So then we would go through this a couple sequences, right?
Is it always the same exact? You start from the crown. It's always the same, the tapping.
Always. Sometimes it will start here, right? People will do here, here. So it doesn't matter as long as it's in one of those areas and you go through the whole sequence together. Okay. So we would go through that a couple times and we would do a check-in, right? And that check-in would be something along those lines. Okay. I know that at this point you really want to do this, but technically you're at a 9 because you're not doing it very often. Where do you feel like you're at now in terms of commitment, right? Because it's one thing to have a desire, but it's a whole nother thing to have a commitment. So your commitment is really at like a 9, right? Maybe a 9.5. But really, and let me reframe this. Your commitment is actually at like a 1.5.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. My desire is high.
And your desire is at a 10. So we want to get the commitment level, which is at the 0.5, let's say, on up to at least an 8 to get you to make a commitment to then do something differently, right? So part of this is also about helping you to get the clarity. So we go through the sequencing a few times together. And then hopefully what would happen is that you would say, oh my gosh, I know exactly why I'm not doing this. Or like, this is ridiculous. Why am I not doing this? Like, I'm going to go and do, like, part of it is about getting clarity. Part of it is about you getting the gumption, but all of that is about moving energy through the body, because when we move energy, we get more clear about something, When we move energy, it propels us to take action, right? So this is why talking through things can be effective, even though limited, but the energy work can be very effective because it can do it at a very rapid pace for you to gain that level of consciousness. And what I'll say lastly is that every time I do Reiki, or I'm doing yoga or any kind of practice, there's a couple things that always happen. I always remember all of these things I need to do, right? That it's like kind of out of sight, out of mind. It's like it comes right back into my sphere of consciousness. B, I get my next big idea, right? Often this happens. C, my energy tends to hike, right? It peaks. So what I noticed that in the moments when I don't do energy work, my energy is actually more waned in those times. I can feel it. And because I practice every day, it only takes me one day of not practicing to know, oh yeah, that's why you're feeling this way, right? That's why you're feeling out of balance today. That's why. And so it's not the only practice I use, right? But it is the one that helps me ground at the start of my day, which then helps to carry me, right, more succinctly throughout the day. Is that helpful? I know that we had
to do that. I love it. I mean, that's something I have to look more into and process, because I know even for just like calming yourself down in different situations, that can be helpful. Wow. I think we can talk forever. I love talking to you. You're so easy to talk to, and you're giving us such great information. And I think, I admire you so much for teaching yourself all these different healing modalities to become a better and happy, peaceful person. So to wrap up, we have the potential for greatness and capacity to achieve if we set our mind to it. Just like you had said, okay, this belief serves as the foundation for our journey. Wellness, according to you, is the key to excelling our various roles, whether it's being a successful businesswoman, partner, or mother. But engaging in profound inner work that wellness demands transforms us into better and more fulfilled individuals. Your mission to pave the way for us to unlock our innate potential and realize our true purpose. That is your mission, and I admire you for that. I am truly impressed by your impactful work, and your mission clearly resonates with both me and our listeners. I extend my best wishes for your ongoing success and your upcoming book. So when is your book being released?
Yeah, so it will be available on Friday, actually.
Oh,
And
wow.
I know. So December 1st, we will be ready. It'll be available on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles and some other outlets as I go through this first phase of self-publishing. And so we're ready. My editor just wrapped up all the final elements that we needed. And my team is working on all the infrastructural pieces. And so, I'm very, very excited, Pearl. I've never been, I don't know. This was a very challenging book to deliver to the world, right? And I've never felt more I've accomplished a lot, but this is different. Like This feels the magnitude of it for me, the courage that it took, the rigor, right? To keep showing up and writing all of it. And I didn't hold back. It was like, "Ooh, Demarra, you're going to share that." And it's like, yeah, that's the truth. These are the truths. These are the truths of my lives and how and I say my lives, right? Because I think, you can go from all of it is my life, and who I am today is so different, right? It's the same, so different, in a plethora of ways.
I'm really excited for you. I think that your book is, again, more part of your healing process, and with your more healing, you're going to be able to help so many other people out there. So I commend you for that. All the links will be in our show notes. And so that if anyone wants to get a hold of you and look you up and find your book and purchase the book, it will be there. And thank you so much for being a guest on Female Fluence today.
Yes, thank you, Pearl. And thanks for the gift that you give to your audience with this podcast. I really, really appreciate an opportunity to be on with you today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today to Female Fluence. Together, we can influence and motivate other mind-like females. Your job is to feel alive, be in control, and always be true to your own self. Please don't forget to subscribe so you can continue feeling inspired. All the links and notes from this episode will be posted on my website, femalefluence.com. Don't forget to also follow me at Female Fluence on both Instagram and Facebook. Lastly, if you are in need of a woman empowerment life coach to help you identify the barriers that keep you from living the life you seek, please send an email to info@femalefluence.org. Remember, my friends, don't just exist, but live your life to the fullest. I'm your host, Mashour. Until we talk next time.